Hi, everyone. So I'm going to go in a completely different direction than the last two speakers. I am a UX researcher at Google. I work on the Daydream team, focusing on augmented reality experiences. And today I wanted to just share some of the approaches and the developments we've been thinking in the area of product inclusion. And I really should have probably called this not the challenges of measuring offensiveness, but the process of measuring offensiveness, because it is a process, and I just wanted, this is almost like a check-in point of where we are, what we're doing, and just kind of sharing our thinking. Oh, there we go. So Daydream's mission is to give superpowers to people through immersive computing. Immersive computing here means, currently means virtual reality, augmented reality, machine perception-driven experiences. And this is a really bold, big, high-level mission statement. It aligns with Google's own mission statement, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And so when we talk about superpowers, this is a really important piece of, important aspect of that is being inclusive. And why is that? Because not all technology benefits people equally. Sometimes when only certain people benefit, it widens opportunity gaps and it widens privilege gaps. And Daydream wants to make sure that all people benefit from the things we build. And so we want to make sure, we've taken a lot of steps and developed a lot of recent thinking on how can we be more inclusive and conscious in our process when we build products. So I wanted to share one example. There's a lot of different efforts going on, but I wanted to share one example from my own personal experience working at Google. And we have the opportunity and the privilege of working with this amazing immersive arts team at Daydream. These are best-in-industry designers, animators, and artists who create a lot of the lush environments and engaging characters in our virtual reality experiences, and more recently, a lot of the augmented reality stickers and Playmoji that were recently announced for our augmented reality experiences. These characters can be very, very engaging. The augmented reality versions are, they anchor in spaces and move around the floor. They have deep interactions and reactions. They can react to people in the scene, other characters, or even to your own expression in selfie mode. So these are very, interactive and very, very meant to really immerse people and get them engaged. We were approached. We don't usually get to work directly with the immersive arts team for research. Our focus tends to be on user experience. We'll get feedback from users on how things look and how creative characters, and whether they like them or not. But we rarely get to work specifically on a project with the immersive arts teams. We're usually just on the sidelines cheering them on because we're big fans. But they reached out to us because they wanted to evaluate a set of their characters that they were developing for AR stickers. They were worried that there were potentially elements that might be offensive or insulting to people, and they wanted to be as inclusive as possible. And they wanted to see if research could help out. And why was this so important? And part of that is because of how we think about creativity and the creative process. We often think about creativity and inspiration starting from a blank canvas. That inspiration happens, a lot of twists and turns, and then art is the result. In reality, it's a lot more complicated. There is no truly blank canvas. There is no inspiration in a vacuum. They've done a lot of studies on creativity and innovation, and generally everything kind of agrees that there are there's the intersection of three components to creativity. One is knowledge, all of the understandings and people and experiences you've had bringing into this experience, bringing into this process. Creative thinking, which is how you work, your work style, how you solve problems. And then motivation, the internal and external factors that drive this process forward or hold it back. So basically, our past and our experiences, all the people we've met, all the things we've experienced, are in some way or another influencing what we create. And if we're not conscious of that, we can pull in things that are, familiar to us, things that resonate with us, things that we think will resonate with people like us, and therefore potentially exclude people who don't have the same backgrounds and didn't know the same people and have the same experiences. So we wanted to set out to understand if so basically we all have blind spots. And that's okay, because those blind spots are a result of us having different backgrounds and having different experiences, but it's important to be aware of them. And so our study was put out there to try to understand, do we have blind spots? Let's try to shine a light on these blind spots and figure out what we're missing out on. And ideally, we can try to figure out, are there any of these assets that are potentially offensive, insulting, and what should we do about it? So this was the set of characters we put into a traditional user research survey. Respondents were asked to basically answer about 3 or 4 questions for each of these characters in randomized order. There would be things like, what are some words that you would use to describe this character? How appealing or unappealing do you find this character? How comfortable or uncomfortable is it to look at this character? And then any final words any additional comments you have to add. After they answer those questions for all of these characters, then we would ask, what was your most favorite and least favorite? And then the final question, we asked, did you find anything offensive or insulting in any of these characters? And that was like a 3-answer choice where, no, I definitely did not. Yes, I definitely did. Or the third choice, yes, I've found something potentially offensive or insulting to people in this set of characters. And if they did either say, yes, I was definitely offended or potentially offended, we then followed up with comments around, can you tell us more about what and why you found something offensive? What do people think came out as the results? Anyone want to raise their hand and shout out? That's okay, you don't. It's only 10-minute talk, so it turns out, so the results are first of all surprising, enlightening, but ultimately problematic. The chili pepper, the surprising piece, chili pepper was #1 most offensive character in the set. It was an interesting dynamic here, like multiple layers, where people felt like it was portrayed in an unintelligent way, with like uneven eyes and teeth, and that itself was a judgment on cultures that liked spicy foods. Not something we expected going in. Definitely shined a light on some of the blind spots we had going into this process. But we also realized we had a lot of problems with this approach when we analyzed the data and dug into the comments. The #2 was beer. And that was because there was no context in this survey about how these were being used. These were just stills being shown. And so a lot of the comments that objected to the beer were that, this is inappropriate for children. They assumed that these were characters on a children's show. Another problem, totally weird children's show. Another problem was that these were presented in the survey as stills, as a part of a constraint of the survey tool that we chose, when in actuality these are animated characters. They have personality traits, they move around a lot. And so the lemon, which was the 3rd most, is, as a still, very offensive to Asian cultures with yellow skin and the portrayal of its eyes. But in actuality, when it's animated, that happens to be a moment where it's like very sour because it's a lemon. And its eyes can shift between normal round dots and like the reaction you get, your facial expression when you're experiencing something sour. There was also a lot difficulty teasing apart the range of reactions we got. There's a difference between being offended, finding something offensive, and then thinking that someone might be offended. And a lot of the comments we got were in that last category. And we quickly realized that if you put a line at, we cannot put anything out there that people might find offensive, we would have no characters at all, because every character had at least a few comments about why this was potentially offensive to someone out there. So we had a lot of challenges here. And the format of the survey was also a problem. We had people assessing an entire set together. This is a set of 10 characters, took about 15, 20 minutes. And when we asked them to find something offensive or insulting in the set, you end up with what I call the lineup effect. And this, when you're tasked to assess a set and find a certain property, you're going to fixate and try to find that property in at least one member of that set. And so this approach helped us understand which characters were most insulting, most likely to be insulting, and why, but it didn't help us identify a point of action. At what point do we need to consider changes? So we kind of went back to the drawing board a bit. They had more assets. This approach also wasn't scalable because the immersive arts team is pumping out a lot of characters, and they're very talented and very productive, and we can't necessarily put out every single thing that they designed to every single user that we can. So we had to think, especially since, what if there's a really large set of 50 characters? We can start sampling different ones, or if there's a very small set, or do you start mixing characters? It just, at that point, if there's different art styles, and it just confuses the debate, doesn't inform any decisions, it just actually just makes it more complex and complicated. Come on, and advance. Is there another way to? Can we advance the slide? Okay, well, I guess these stuffed animals are not too bad to look at. Okay. Do we have any more? Okay. I'm going to try to regain my thoughts here. I can at least take a peek. All right. So we want an approach that we could use scalably and reliably into the future, that could assess, and help us identify, move towards a foundation of having a point of action, understanding what that threshold of action was. And so we changed our approach with a more recent release to focus on individual assets. So instead of a long survey that goes through each one, we had very, very short surveys, and for individual assets, and basically answering two basic questions. How appealing or unappealing is this? And if it's unappealing, why? And then we go dig into the comments to try to understand. Now we can start to benchmark assets against each other, not just within the same set, but in different sets at different times, and even assets that are not our own, so that we can move towards understanding, is there a problem here, and should we take action? So this is a process. We have many different efforts underway. This is one of them. Another one that's really important, I think, is to not just be reactive and think about what do we need to change in case people bring up there's potentially offensive material. We're also pulling a lot of best practices from the hiring space, trying to be more mindful in our decisions. We're putting out a checklist with our artists and designers to go through and really be conscious when you design a character. What are their attributes? What do they look like? What do they do? What is their identity? And this is similar to the interview process where you're supposed to interview your candidates, but across predefined attributes and rate them accordingly without necessarily attaching names to them to try to remove that bias from the interview process. We're trying to do the exact same thing with the creative process. So a couple of takeaways from this. So this is just a work in progress, like I said. A couple of things I've taken away. One is to be transparent. It helps to work with teams when you try to find your common ground. At some point, your goals will align. So be transparent about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. And next would be to also be direct, because you're going to have uncomfortable and awkward conversations about their work. No one likes to be told that their work is potentially offensive or insulting. So expect that, be comfortable with it, and try to just be transparent as possible. And finally, be flexible. This is a work in progress, it's a process. Change definitely takes time. And so I'd say, try to set realistic goals for success and build on that success by laying a foundation for more work in the future. Thank you.